and we have to really escalate the noise we make so that we'll be heard.
Welcome to Gay USA. I'm Andy Hum.
I'm Ann Northrup.
And wow, in the news this week, most of the Democratic candidates for president were questioned at an LGBT forum in Iowa.
We'll give you the nuances of our reaction, although I can't say it was entirely thrilling. That's the headline. And as Trump faces impeachment, that's a little more thrilling. He has the nerve at the UN to speak about LGBT rights abroad.
Speaking of nerve, HUD Secretary Ben Carson worried at a meeting about big hairy men in women's shelters.
I have to sigh after that. Mattel has come out with gender-inclusive dolls just in time for the holiday season. We'll show them to you.
In Australia, a young gay man and his little brother were gay bashed in Australia, and a teen at a Ukraine Pride, Ukraine, you heard that word lately, was assaulted by a mob. We are going to show you that.
I'm trying to cough to cover up the stumbles here.
Right.
The mayor of Montego Bay, Jamaica, has thwarted the annual Pride Festival there.
Terrible. LGBT history was made at the Emmy Awards.
Sorry, just a dry spot in my throat. I'm not sick or anything.
Yep. And we will review Derren Brown's Secret on Broadway, but we will not tell you the secret, except the one he tells right at the top of the show. Okay. All right. Well, you know.
I think I'm done.
Okay.
I'll get the cough drop anyway. Well, the Democratic candidates were invited to show up for a presidential forum, not a debate, at Coe College in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, sponsored by GLAAD and the local newspaper.
Advocate.
And One Iowa, I don't know if the Advocate was the sponsor of this one.
They were listed on the background.
Yeah? Okay. One Iowa, the statewide LGBT group. So they appeared one at a time with a series of different questioners because the questioners wanted to be diverse, yes. And so it was semi-interesting, but shall I run down,
Sure.
Shall we go through these?
Sure.
In order, Marianne Williamson was the first. That made me happy because she's always entertaining. I thought, I read something that said she was sort of stumbling, but I found her very fluid on LGBTQIA+. She got that rolling off her tongue just fine. She was challenged on her writings 30 years ago about supposedly healing HIV with basically positive thinking. She said, no, I never said that. I just said, that was therapeutic or whatever, and besides, there were no drugs then. I thought that was a little defensive and off. But she's certainly supportive and certainly pretty well versed. And what'd you think?
Of her?
Yeah.
I don't take her seriously as a candidate.
No,
so,
me either.
I don't focus on it.
And
I do focus on, well, should we talk about, you want to go in order? I'm going in your order.
Yeah. Well, this is the order of the forum.
Oh, okay.
Pardon me. Joe Sestak, ex-admiral, we certainly don't take him seriously. He was awkward but sincere. Moving on. Biden.
Well,
Biden was third. We will pause to discuss Biden.
You're a lovely woman. Was that what he said?
He was so angry and resentful.
I will tell you in general, I think, and again, I don't have a candidate and I will vote for anybody who runs against Trump.
Yes.
But I think Biden and Sanders, who was not at this debate, they mainly project anger over a lot of things.
Yes.
And I think one of the things that's sort of more appealing about Warren and why she's jumping in the polls is because she's more of a happy warrior.
Yes.
She's talking about some very serious, horrible things that are happening in the world, but she does it in a very upbeat way, and I think that's very appealing.
She's sincere.
Yeah.
She's not sarcastic. She's forthright and thoughtful and energetic and all of that. But I think the lack of resentment in her voice it does make that difference with the voters. And Biden, I'd sort of forgotten that he voted for DOMA and for Don't Ask, Don't
DOMA I
Tell.
remember very well, but 80% of the Congress voted for DOMA, and the Clintons supported it. And
I haven't let them off the hook, and I haven't.
And John Kerry only voted against it because he was running against Bill Weld, who was running against Trump now, but he was running against him for Senate, and he didn't want to get outflanked on the gay stuff.
So Biden keeps throwing in things about, I was at the Stonewall Inn recently. Those are the brave people. Whatever.
I mean, when Biden is probably getting confused because when he would show up to things as vice president, and of course he did come out for same-sex marriage before Obama.
Oh my God! As he reminded us ad nauseum.
Yes, but when they celebrated same-sex marriage, the big national celebration they had at New York, he was there and he was basking in all of this. So he's sort of wondering,
Well, he's still basking in it, and he acts like he invented same-sex marriage, and he was the first, and blah blah blah. And no, you weren't. And get over
Chuck
yourself.
Schumer voted for DOMA too.
Yeah, of course he did, and we haven't let him forget that. And I'm not letting Joe Biden forget about Anita Hill either.
Right.
So I found his performance remarkably nasty. And as you say, he was nasty to the woman asking him questions because she was challenging him on this, and he really resented being challenged. And that was not good.
Well, when they say, he voted for Don't Ask, Don't Tell, didn't Barney Frank? I mean, wasn't it like the
It was a compromise.
Right.
Yes,
So,
it was a
that's how about,
compromise.
talk about context.
Yes.
I mean, they were trying to save us from an outright ban.
Yes, on that I will. I'll give him a pass on that. Cory Booker, strong, claimed to have brought Hetrick Martin Institute to Newark. I don't know how much he was involved in that.
I remember covering, when Miri Baraka's lesbian daughter was murdered out there. There was a demonstration I covered. Went out to Newark. And I didn't know Cory Booker, and he was just a politician at that time. He hadn't been elected mayor, and he was the only politician who was there.
I think he puts on a good show. I'm not sure how much substance there is.
I don't think Amiri Baraka's son was there. He's the mayor now.
Cory Booker was very HIV literate. He knew all the right things to say about that. Tulsi Gabbard, fine.
I know, she was confronted.
Not important.
Blah, blah, blah.
Kamala Harris was challenged on being against trans people transitioning in prison. And her story there is she says, well, I was the Attorney General of the state. They're my clients. I had to defend them. And 5 seconds later, she's talking about how she refused to defend Prop 8. And I thought, wait a minute.
My head is spinning.
Yeah. That's a little situational ethics. Pete Buttigieg, I thought was fine. Nothing, stunning, but absolutely fine.
Complaining about the LGBT media.
Well, yes and no. He
actually took that back. But,
Amy Klobuchar, I thought she was strong and urgent. I thought she was perfectly admirable in what she had to say. And I was very moved by Elizabeth Warren starting off by reading the names of the dead trans women.
18 trans women of color who were murdered this year, and that was a hell of a thing to put out there. She explained her
her opposition to the
gender confirmation surgery in the past.
Well, again, for someone in prison. That was a famous Massachusetts case, too.
And by the way, speaking of 18 trans women who were murdered, we almost added one in Dallas this week who was shot. But
I think Elizabeth Warren is being very well advised on these issues. I do not know who she's talking to or who's working with her, but she's been very present and sophisticated in her.
We've come a long way from Ted Kennedy meeting with a bunch of gay people, was about to give a speech, and he said, "What do you people want to be called now?" which is it's a good thing to ask behind the scenes before you go out there and find out what the latest terminology is.
And the last one was Julian Castro, who I thought was also strong and talked about educating people on LGBTQ issues, which I thought was an excellent point to make. And he talked about also being sure to bring in asylum seekers, and that was also a good point
and
to
Pete
make.
Buttigieg, got the endorsement of 50 mayors this past
yes,
week.
He did.
That's significant.
Now, I was disappointed that there were not more questions like, what have you actually done for us, not just what are your promises. Yeah. And the question I always want to ask of someone like Biden is, okay, so you did these bad things and then you apologize, but how are we to trust you in the future if you didn't have the judgment to do the right thing in the first place? An apology is fine, but it doesn't increase my my trust in you.
Well, we'll find out more at the October 10th town hall with CNN. So far, I think it's Biden, Booker, Buttigieg, Castro, Harris, Klobuchar, O'Rourke, Steyer, and Warren.
Still no Bernie Sanders.
The moderators are going to be, it's a CNN HRC debate. Anderson Cooper, Don Lemon, Dana Bash, and
Chris
Cuomo.
Yep.
Yay. Sanders and Yang declined. It's 7 p.m. to 11:30 p.m. Eastern.
Well, it's the same format. It's just one at a time for them, but they're going to get more time, each of them.
Now, that last half hour will be cutting into our New York time at Gay USA, so,
Set your DVRs. But I did feel that the one in Iowa went pretty fast, for better or worse.
Yeah.
I was glad not to have to sit there for 4.5 hours, as I will for the CNN one. But it was a little too quick with everybody. There wasn't an opportunity for too much in-depth questioning.
Speaking of HRC, they are honoring Ricky Martin at their annual dinner on 9/28 in Washington.
All right. Let me see if I had anything more.
And lest we forget, also in Washington on September 28th, Saturday at 9 a.m., starting a Transvisibility March in Washington.
Yes, the first ever.
Starting at Freedom Plaza, 14th in Pennsylvania, then having a rally at the Capitol, marching at 11 a.m., marching to the Capitol, Transvisibility in D.C.
I think that could be big. And then 10 days later, as the Supreme Court hears arguments on October 8th on the 3 non-discrimination cases, there will be a fairly major civil disobedience outside the court.
Well, and we're going a little out of order here. It's the second picture we ordered, but at the Emmy Awards this week, Laverne Cox took Chase Strangio, the transgender lawyer at the ACLU, as
Chase on the left, Laverne in the middle,
as her date to the Emmys on the red carpet. And
they talked about it.
That purse has information about this, and they talked about this October 8th demo. And Chase very briefly and very succinctly expressed what it was all about, what the cases were all about. And what they're all about is deciding if sexual orientation and gender identity are covered under the Civil Rights Act of 1964 under the category of sex. That's what the Supreme Court's going to be deciding, and we will be listening carefully.
Chase actually said it better by just saying the court's going to decide whether you can fire gay and trans people.
Yes.
So that
and it's not just employment; it's everything.
It is, but
public accommodations, etc.
Yes, and housing. But
and speaking of marches, I was so moved by the climate change march. This all over the world. There's one of the women I took a picture of. Our future in
your hands.
Yeah, in your hands. You are hands. But it was endless. And there were so many young people out there, and their signs were so inspiring. I will say something about those young people. They are never going to vote Republican for the rest of their lives. I mean, it's locked in at that point. When you're raising an issue, when you're young, and of course, they're terrified of the future, as well they should be.
Yeah.
We may escape the water coming up the block, although it has already where we live in Manhattan, but during these storms. And I'm sure many of you have been affected by it as well, but they are terrified.
Worse.
They are terrified.
Well, and I'm terrified for them, and I'm terrified for us and all of that. But meanwhile, this is all built around the UN General Assembly meeting here in New York the last couple of weeks. And our, I hate to say it, president made a fool of himself at the UN on many bases.
Well, he actually had the nerve to stand up there, and I'm going to give his quote. He was really slurring his words this week. Something's going on there, folks, if you're not paying attention. My administration is working with other nations to stop criminalization of homosexuality, and we stand with LGBT people who live in countries that punish, jail, and execute people based upon sexual orientation. The nerve of you, while you're fighting gay rights in the court on October 8th, here at home, you'd like to see,
and every day in every federal agency,
right,
and throwing trans people out of the military, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Then you get up and start lecturing other countries. At the same time that you're saying that the future of the world is not globalism, it's patriots, it's nationalism, it's
fascism.
Yes, exactly. And at the same time that you have headlined a religious freedom event at the UN during this whole thing.
Well, he seems to want religious freedom for the Saudis. We're sending troops over there. It's reminding me of Vietnam all over again.
Here we go.
And, let's talk about other things that happened in the administration this week. I mean, Betsy DeVos at the Department of Education threatening to pull hundreds of thousands in federal funds from the Duke UNC Consortium for Middle East Studies because they say it does not emphasize positive aspects of Judaism and Christianity. And this could very well lead to pulling grants from places that they think favor homosexuality.
We told you last week about a nominee to the State Department who's very anti-LGBT. Well, of course, he was confirmed by Mitch McConnell's Senate, Robert Destro, as Assistant Secretary of State for Democracy, Human Rights, and Labor.
And then there's Dr. Ben Carson at HUD. He worried aloud at a meeting in San Francisco about big, hairy men trying to infiltrate women's homeless shelters. He told the staff, society no longer knows the difference between men and women. No one in the Trump administration knows the difference between right and wrong. Carson said he was mischaracterized, but not fundamentally.
And to their credit, the staff at the HUD office in San Francisco was furious about this, and one woman got up and walked out in the middle of this.
On the other hand, there was kind of a good decision at Duke. The student senate there unanimously denied funding to a Christian group called Young Life, which had been on campus but not been funded because they exclude staff or leadership who practice a homosexual lifestyle. And I'm sure the religious right will get all crazy about that, but these groups expect funding as well as being able to practice their bigotry.
At Brigham Young University in Provo, Utah, the president of the Mormon Church, Russell Nelson, gave a speech and said, God says that only man-woman marriage is legitimate. I had breakfast this week with a niece of mine who lives in Utah, and was celebrating the fact that she thinks BYU is really headed for the ash heap very soon.
Really?
Yes.
Because?
Well, she says Utah is really changing very fast and radically.
My roommate is from St. George in the south there, is a suburb.
Southwest,
They had Pride this week.
Yep. Well, St. George is a very conservative area.
Getting less so, obviously.
Yeah, no, Utah is on the rise.
Although something scared me very much in the New York Times this week. Farhad Manjoo, a columnist there, a liberal, wrote that while Trump may well lose in 2020, a good likely candidate for 2024 is Tucker Carlson.
Oh, please.
I
read it.
Same
Come
thing we
on.
said about Trump.
No, I didn't say that about Trump. But I will say that about Tucker Carlson.
Well, this guy watches them to follow what the message is.
Don't hold your breath.
All right.
In Alabama, a federal court says that the Southern Poverty Law Center has a free speech right to call the James Kennedy Ministries at Coral Ridge Presbyterian Church a hate group, dismissing the church's lawsuit against the SPLC. That was a nice free speech decision.
By the way, there was a big anti-Trump demonstration here in New York, and we did drive him out of town the next day.
That was a joke.
And then there's Eugene Scalia. I just happened to be flipping channels, and there he was, having his confirmation hearing, and a lot of the Democrats are asking him LGBT questions.
Son of Antonin.
They ask the question, and then he says something, and they just move on. They don't pin him down on any of this stuff. I thought Doug Jones did a pretty good job trying to say, what about this new regulation at the Department of Labor that you're contemplating about religious liberty and for contractors that's going to let them discriminate against gays? And he lets Scalia basically say, oh, I think we're all against discrimination, but he's going to implement that rule. They didn't pin him down on anything, and he left that hearing smiling.
Yeah, well.
So the Democrats are just not sophisticated enough to ask these questions.
They also
He's
have
going to
no
slip
power.
away anyway, but at least have a moment where he has to say, I'm very open to that. Or
I'm a monster?
Well, no. Well, that would be nice. Oh, well, that's Corey Lewandowski. And our buddy Jerry Nadler certainly let him off the hook. Should have had him locked up during that hearing.
Well, these guys.
For contempt of Congress.
Oh, he was.
Even
Nancy
Nancy
was a
said
pig.
so.
Yes, exactly. And then there's Menashe, who's nominated for a judgeship. And he appeared before Congress and was running rings around them. And Senator Kennedy from Louisiana, the Republican, who's a mixed bag.
John Kennedy.
Yes. He was being questioned as a guest on MSNBC about this guy. And he said, he's very rude. He was terrible. But I haven't made up my mind yet. Yeah.
Well, Kennedy actually did stop some really horrible nominee.
Yes,
but,
he did.
Ted Lieu in California said, in the Lewandowski hearing, we brought a machete to a knife fight.
In Maryland, a judge rejected a suit by a conversion therapist who wanted to be able to go back to practicing his profession. And the judge said, no, it's too dangerous. I've got all the scientific evidence here, and you do not get to overturn the law banning conversion therapy.
All right.
Let's do our sports roundup.
All right.
Well, first of all, U.S. soccer star Abby Wambach was inducted into the National Soccer Hall of Fame. We have a picture of her here with her wife, Glennon Doyle. Abby on the left, Glennon on the right. Congratulations to her.
Megan Rapinoe was named the best soccer player in the football, they call it, but soccer player in the world by FIFA.
Female.
By FIFA.
Lionel Messi was the male winner, but she gave a very good speech about a lot of stuff, including LGBT rights, which you can find out.
In Long Beach, California, they dedicated the Billie Jean King Library. It's a fabulous-looking place. She was born and raised there. She's 75 years old now.
You can see the ribbon cutting there, and there, whoa, that's a big BJK sign outside the library.
What does BJK stand for, Mommy?
Well, she talked about how this was so meaningful to her because it was her hometown.
Sure.
And all the legends about Billie Jean when she was at the height of her career were about her growing up on these cement courts or concrete courts in Long Beach and learning how to play on the public courts with free lessons from the town and all of that. So I think it was a great celebration. So it's Lesbians in Sports Week at Gay USA.
And then there was the Rice-Baylor game in football.
Oh, yes, yes.
Okay, so this is at Baylor, and Rice University has a marching band, the Marching Owl Band, and because
Baylor is a very right-wing
Baptist school, gay school. They tweaked them.
Gay.
They tweaked them.
Anti-gay school.
They tweaked them at the halftime by waving rainbow flags around, and then spelling out PRIDE at halftime there, and they're playing the Village People's YMCA. Now, this is a protest at Baylor denying recognition to the LGBT student group Gamma Alpha Epsilon. Get it? Gay, G-A-Y. But the marching band was mostly applauded by both sides, and there were a few boos.
Yeah. Texas, Utah, progress.
Yeah, well, I mean, young people.
Yes, exactly. Well, in fact, a sad story out of Texas you referred to earlier in Dallas, and currently unnamed trans woman shot by a guy driving by in a pickup, yelling slurs at her. A miracle she survived. She was shot several times.
In Los Angeles, we learned more about this Ed Buck case. This is this major Democratic donor, gay guy. There's now a 22-page federal complaint against him. 10 men who he subjected to. He picks up the guys, he injects them with drugs. Some of them died. He dresses them in skimpy underwear for his sexual delectation, and leaves them unconscious in many cases. They wake up and they've been slipped a Mickey or something like that.
They've been injected with meth.
Against their will,
yeah.
In many cases, in most cases.
In milder anti-LGBT news, a lesbian, Renee Garish, got on a flight from Boston to Atlanta on Delta, and when she got off her flight in Atlanta and picked up her luggage, she found that her rainbow luggage tag had been defaced by someone writing sodomite on it. So Delta is looking into this. Now, it could be a Delta employee, it could be a baggage handler who isn't employed by Delta.
At least it's somebody who can spell, unlike the Marquess of Queensberry, who called Oscar Wilde a somdomite.
And whose handwriting might be discernible.
Sure. And also on Staten Island, a 48-year-old man, Brian Jones, was charged with aggravated harassment as a hate crime and for sending numerous hate-filled screeds to the Staten Island Pride Center. He got kind of violent in his language, accused them all of pedophilia, and he was racist, and he used the N-word, and he called them animals, die, savages, castrate. He said, yeah, it was me. So he's been charged. I mean, in other words, there was no physical violence, but this was enough to get him charged with aggravated harassment.
Certainly one would assume that physical violence is on the menu at some point. Yeah. In better news, temporarily at least, in Indianapolis, Indiana, we have told you about the Catholic high school that refused to fire a gay employee who was married to a same-sex.
To another gay teacher at another Catholic school.
Yes. So the local archdiocese had told the school they could no longer call themselves Catholic.
And this meant they couldn't play football games against some other
Among
Catholic
other
schools.
things, I'm sure. Well, the Vatican Congregation for Catholic Education has called a halt to this temporarily while they look into it.
Temporarily is the operative word. It's
well,
a suspension.
We'll see. We shall see. They have suspended that judgment. They are not allowing the high school to be excommunicated. They are looking into it. We will keep you up to date on that story.
Also in good news, well, you're sticking with churches. The United Methodist Church is coming up with all of its plans now to separate, and there are very many plans, but it's all going to be decided next May for their
I
separation.
think we can wait on that. Do you need some water?
I might go get some water. Why don't you?
Here.
Okay, out of your
Share
glass.
mine, yes. I'm not sick. I don't know if you are. Mattel Toy Company, as the holiday season is coming up, has been paying attention to discussion of gender and non-binary roles and all that kind of stuff. So they have put out a line of gender-inclusive dolls.
They're called Creative World dolls, and they've been tested on 250 families, including 15 with kids who identify as trans, non-binary, or gender fluid.
Now, you see those lines, those vertical lines down each doll. The point is that you can make choices about clothing and hair and switch it up and create dolls in any kind of form that you would like.
Now, somebody from Mattel gave out this quote. Thank you, Bill. They said there were a couple of they called them gender creative kids, who told us that they dreaded Christmas Day because they knew whatever they got under the Christmas tree, it wasn't made for them.
Yes.
So why not? And
so people are really happy about it. And they also found that more traditionally gendered kids also liked these dolls and liked the creative possibilities of them and were much more open than people our age were at that age, to the idea of difference and less rigid definitions.
We've been talking about places that you might not expect to support us, but in Kansas, the Shawnee Mission School District voted to add LGBT protections to its non-discrimination policy.
Shawnee Mission is a very affluent suburb. And,
all right, it's still in Kansas.
Probably progressive. There are progressive people in Kansas.
By the way, there was a development in the trans-military case this week. We didn't talk about. I got this from Art Leonard.
Okay.
The U.S. District Court in D.C. ruled for the plaintiffs on discovery issues. They will.
We are the plaintiffs.
Yes, they will decide on the level of review whether it'll be deferential or heightened scrutiny based on whatever the Mattis plan that replaced Trump's tweet shows. Did it show a considered professional judgment after a reasonable evaluation of the issue?
Or knuckling under to blackmail and extortion?
Yeah, the court won't defer if it was politically inspired. So
I think it was pretty politically. It was a valiant effort to come up with an adult solution to this.
Right. And how about Fort Lauderdale?
How about it?
Well, I mean, the city commission unanimously passed an ordinance that bans discrimination on the basis of sexual orientation and gender identity in jobs, housing, public accommodations, and also established some kind of domestic partner protections that I couldn't figure out what were because we have marriage now, and they banned conversion therapy for minors all at once after holding this up for decades.
Oh, my only question is what took them so long.
Exactly. Well, that's what always happens in these things. They resist. They resist.
Fort Lauderdale is pretty darn LGBTQ.
And we had a breakthrough in Pennsylvania, yes, with a Republican state senator who's been holding up our legislation all these years.
Oh, the non-discrimination bill.
Yes, Mike Fulmer. He's head of the powerful committee that stops the bill all the time.
Yeah.
He was arrested and charged with possession of child pornography. He's been removed from his chair. He says, I have some personal problems. He's a married guy with kids and all this kind of stuff. Governor Tom Wolf called for his immediate resignation.
That would be nice.
All right.
All right, international news. Okay. Some bad news to start with. In Jamaica, the Pride organizers have canceled their festival because they think it's going to be too dangerous. The mayor of Montego Bay has been saying nasty things and keeping them out of the cultural
Maurice
center.
Tomlinson, who organizes this, is very depressed about all this because he works so hard and they're not getting any support. And we're trying to buck him up, Maurice.
They're going to sue the mayor and officials for breaching the rights to free expression and assembly of the LGBTQ people.
A very sad story out of Australia on the Gold Coast in Queensland. A gay man, 21, we only know him as Joshua, we have a picture of him. He was visiting from Melbourne with his 16-year-old brother on a bus going to the mall, and a group of 10 cowards, teenagers, started shouting slurs at them, effing faggots and all that kind of stuff, and then attacked them at the mall, at the food court, stomping them to the ground.
Beat them severely.
The guy said they were bloodthirsty, they were animals. A security guard broke it up, two people were arrested, two teenagers, but Joshua said, I feel like me being gay, I just put my brother in danger. No, it's their fault, not your fault.
Right. In Nigeria, some anti-LGBTQ protesters showed up to demand even harsher laws of the government.
You can get 14 years there in prison for having a same-sex marriage.
Not enough, evidently. They were particularly upset that a popular drag performer was now coming out as trans, and that just freaked them out, and so they showed up for more.
We want to nip down all those who are involved in lesbianism and gay activities, they said.
And in Ukraine, we have been telling you about the Pride parade held in the second largest city, Kharkiv. But we now have some video of a sort of post-march event.
Well, this is the kid who they went after, a teenager. And then, if we can show the video, and we'll talk about it. I mean, they look, they're cowards. They surround this kid. He's like, leave me alone. He's trying to walk off with a woman friend of his. And they just, I mean, these big thugs chase him, stomp him, beat him, run after him. I mean, this is Nazi stuff.
Yeah, definitely.
Ukraine.
Yeah.
Much in the news.
Yes, for many reasons, but that's one of them.
I mean, there were 2,000 people who marched in that march, the Pride March, 500 counter-protesters. And onlookers were applauding while they were beating this kid. And it took a photographer from Reuters to step out from his role as a journalist and rescue this kid from being killed.
Mob mentality. Better news. In Mauritius, the Young Queer Alliance is challenging the anti-LGBT laws there. Yeah. I'm always inspired when people step up in unlikely places. And here, I never would have believed I'd have anything approaching good news from Indonesia. There is a proposal there for some new draconian laws to forbid sex outside
marriage,
heterosexual marriage, and anti-abortion law and the whole thing. Well, the president of Indonesia has delayed a vote on this law.
Well, like the Vatican, it's a suspension.
Well, possibly, but there have been huge demonstrations against the law, and
it's crazy.
Of course,
I mean, they've always
a lot of crazy laws here too.
Well, yes, I know.
But my point being that this is, I never would have expected it to be delayed, let alone stopped. But if the huge demonstrations are happening against it, maybe they will not pass this law.
All right.
Maybe
hope springs eternal. In Tokyo, they're hosting the Rugby World Cup, and a Pride House has popped up there.
And I was interested to read a tidbit from the autobiography of former British Prime Minister David Cameron, who says that in 2013, Putin told him that he had passed the no promo homo law because he was worried about the diminishing population in Russia.
Really?
I'm sure he said that.
I'm sure he said it, but maybe it's some rationalization. It's about propping himself up in a failing regime.
Well, more than one reason can exist at the same time. Even if that's the reason he's giving to the population of Russia, it's an astonishingly stupid reason. But interesting that it would show up in this book.
In Brazil, encouraging news. Even though Bolsonaro's there, these were probably his friends. 5 people were indicted for the murder of Marielle Franco there.
Yes, although they were like government officials, it wasn't the actual attackers. It had something to do with, the rhetoric against her.
Okay. In Ghana, a Ghanaian man secured asylum in the United States. He had been attacked in 2015. He was helped by New York Law School's asylum clinic, and local prosecutors would not prosecute his attackers there.
And we're keeping a close eye on the gospel singer in Rwanda, who we told you about last week, who came out because when you come out in Rwanda, you're taking a chance. But he's alive and well a week later and is getting widely rejected by family and friends and a lot of complaints.
Lost his job.
Yep. But he is sticking to his guns and says he's happy about having come out. And
my intention, he said, is to tell the truth.
If only that were universally.
In Kazakhstan, the High Court ruled that 2 women will receive compensation from a Facebook user who posted a video of them kissing without their permission. They said their privacy rights were violated. And we missed another note at the UN. History was made. The Prime Minister of
Luxembourg,
Xavier Bettel, was the first out head of government to speak about LGBTI issues at the General Assembly. He said, being gay is not a choice, he said, but not accepting it is a choice.
Yes.
He focused on
homophobia is a choice.
Wanted to end hate speech.
Now, that was a special little meeting. It wasn't a speech to the whole General Assembly.
Well, that's the way I read it, but all right.
Go back and read it.
And in Canada, an appeals court in British Columbia, in this case, ruled 8-0 for a transgender teen who at 14 told judges he would be left stranded between genders if they backed his father's legal efforts to halt his hormone treatment. The kid started identifying at 11, has the support of his mom. The court also ordered the father to use the child's chosen pronouns or you'll be guilty of sort of abuse. The father calls this totalitarian interference. Canada, they have something called the Infants Act, that allows minors to consent to their own health care. I don't know if we have that here.
We're more protective or paternalistic.
Parental rights, yeah.
Yes. So all the vaccine stuff.
Okay.
AIDS news?
Yes.
Jonathan Van Ness is one of the stars of the new version of Queer Eye for the Straight Guy, which airs on Netflix now.
32 years old.
Yes. And he has written an autobiography called Over the Top. He's a very popular cast member of this show. And it's a rather grim story of having been sexually abused as a child, having gone through a lot of addiction, and being HIV positive.
And he knows that he feels very scared and vulnerable about telling you all this, but he's known that he's HIV positive since he was 25, and he felt he needed to be open because of the Trump administration's stigmatization of the LGBT community, despite what the president said at the UN.
Yeah.
In his New York Times interview, he also spoke about being an addict as well.
Yeah, and it was a kind of heart-wrenching story of how upset he was for how many years and how painful and terrified he was and what he did go through in terms of sexual addiction, drug addiction, acting out. It's a grim story.
Congratulations to our friends at Broadway Cares Equity Fights AIDS. Their 33rd annual flea market and grand auction raised $870,000 in Schubert Alley. The highest bid at the auction was lunch with Andre DeShields.
Really?
$13,000.
Oh, my God.
It also included tickets to Hadestown and an Hermes doll in his image, but $13,000. Hey,
and
Andre,
he came here for free.
I had dinner with you in London when you were doing the full Monty, and all I had to do was pick up the check.
We love Andre.
Yes, we do.
That's an amazing amount.
High cotton.
Yeah. Thank you to Mark King, who is a very well-known blogger on HIV
My
issues.
Fabulous Disease.
My Fabulous Disease is his blog, and well worth reading. And he wrote a very interesting and brave column this week about apologizing for having let himself get hoodwinked by Gilead and other pharmaceutical companies and believing them and not looking into their stories more closely when they sponsor HIV organizations and research and stuff. And he told about how he discovered, through a little more research, that these companies really manipulate the market around these drugs and recommend some drugs when they are in a position to make money off them, and then trash them when they aren't, when they're about to turn generic.
Don't put out new versions that are less toxic because they want to use up the patent on the other one. That kind of stuff.
So thank you to Mark for having the guts to do that, and read that column on My Fabulous Disease. It's very enlightening.
Mark King.
Yes.
All right.
Entertainment news. Well, we have a lot to talk about with the Emmys. Should we start there?
Yes, why not?
First of all, I have to say, although the ratings are going right in the toilet and people complained about the show all over the place, I liked it.
Well, I watched the whole thing, and
I like the use of pop music rather than the orchestra. I like the snarky jokes by the offstage announcer when I could hear them.
who was the woman doing the in memoriam in that outfit?
That was
I
wait a
mean,
minute.
she looked
Halsey,
like it looked like
out by woman.
I know.
Her singing was a little off, but she sang the song under the in
in
memoriam.
terms of awards, well, of course, the history that was made that we alluded to was Billy Porter from Pose.
Yes.
Put him up there. He said the category is love. He was the first African.
He was the first out gay man to win Best Actor for a drama series. And I love him in Pose. I was thrilled to see him win. I think he's absolutely terrific. He just commands the screen. He's so charismatic.
Yep.
And Pose is a wonderful show, a little simplistic, but well worth watching.
And then the out gay actor Ben Whishaw. I'm surprised this is still winning awards. It seems pretty old to me, but a very English scandal. He thanked his partner Mark for keeping him sane. He won for Best Supporting Actor. By the way, before we get to some of the others, I was really thrilled to see Jarrell Jerome win for playing Corey Wise in When They See Us, about the exonerated five, as he said, the Central Park case there. It was terrific. It was a very popular win. And who else do we have?
I'm thrilled to see Jodie Comer win Best Actress in a Drama for Killing Eve, which has been one of my favorite shows for the last couple of years. Very homoerotic between her and Sandra Oh. And poor Sandra Oh has been nominated about 10 times without winning anything, but the two of them together are just magical, and Jodie Comer was wonderful as
and I have
winner.
yet to see Fleabag, which won all these awards, which is on Amazon, so I'll have to get Amazon, I guess.
I just got it, although I've been warned that Fleabag can be a little tough.
And Patricia Arquette won, and she spoke up for her late trans sister Alexis, and spoke up for trans people.
Yeah.
And you know what she said? She said, give them jobs. And of course, I guess partly meant in show business, but that was supporting actress in a limited series. And RuPaul's Drag Race won Best Competition Show. And Ru got up there and encouraged everyone to vote. Are you all registered to vote and voting? I hope so. In every single election, primary and general.
They've now divided the reality show competition into, I think, 3 separate categories now, and this was competition reality as opposed to different kinds of reality shows. So he won that, and he had already won Best Host, which he's now won at least twice, maybe 3 times.
And Peter Dinklage won for Game of Thrones, expressed his gratitude for being in a profession dedicated to tolerance and diversity. And he said a bad word, and they bleeped him.
And another of the reality categories was structured reality, whatever that may be, but Queer Eye won that. So Drag Race won reality competition, Queer Eye won reality structured, and I'm not sure what the third one was.
By the way, we didn't quote Billy Porter and his James Baldwin quote that he used, and I think we should. He said, as James Baldwin said, it took many years of vomiting up all the filth that I had been taught about myself and halfway believed before I could walk around the earth like I have a right to be here. I have the right, and then Billy said, I have the right, you have the right, we all have the right. That's what we're all about.
Well, he was terrific. Also, Jane Lynch won the Emmy for Guest Actress on a Comedy Show for The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel. And Cherry Jones won the award for Guest Actress in a Drama for The Handmaid's Tale.
All right. Okay. We've told you about we saw the Broadway show Boys in the Band. It's being made into a movie by Ryan Murphy. And now Life Imitates Art. Andrew Rannells and Tuck Watkins, who played Larry and Hank, the squabbling lovers, and they're going to be so in the movie, letting it be known that on Instagram that they are a couple in real life. They are also co-starring in the second season of Black Monday about the aftermath of the '87 stock market crash.
That's on Netflix.
I mean, I shouldn't say they're co-starring. Andrew's in it, and Tuck is playing a guest role in it.
Okay.
Okay.
Now, what's this American More?
Well,
I'm going out of order.
Well,
they can do that.
We can do that. We can do that. American More is this play by and starring Keith Hamilton Cobb. He's a middle-aged African-American actor, and this is down at the Cherry Lane. It's getting a lot of buzz, and he is auditioning to be in Othello, but with a white director who's somebody sitting in the audience who's doing this thing. And it is all his anger and rage over the way you're treated in show business, essentially. And he says, come on, I know. And you get to hear his interior monologue. Yeah. This goes on for 90 minutes. Be prepared for it. It's quite a show. It's about things that he feels he can't say and still get the job. But he is just so angry, and he's a guy himself, who is deeply rooted in Shakespeare and knows it, But he hates things like directors saying, "Well, you know what Shakespeare's trying to say here." Do you know him? You're a friend of his? All right, so that's down at the Cherry Lane until October the 5th.
Okay.
Okay. Now we.
Speaking of knowing.
Went to see Derren Brown's show Secret. Now, it's basically a psychic act, right?
Well, it's magic and mentalism and higher brow, more sophisticated, and very well done. Magic act.
We're not allowed to tell the secret.
No.
Although there are many secrets, and I was amazed at many of these routines.
You were a little more amazed than I was, but I was entertained. I sat through the whole 2.5 hours with one intermission length of the show.
But it's not spilling the beans too much to tell us the first thing that he tells us right at the top of the show. He says, "I used to have a secret. I'm gay." He said, "I didn't come out till I was 31. I don't know why I didn't, but I didn't." He's very winning with the audience. He's sophisticated.
Well, he's British, so Andy likes him even more. Yes.
Is that it?
Yeah, he's pretty charming, and he's very smooth.
Yes.
So he really leads you through a whole, as they say, journey.
Now he kind of wants you to think it's about more than it is.
Yes.
In terms of life, and he wants to teach some life lessons. Don't worry about it. But that's part of the distraction, because it kind of sucks you into these things that he's doing with all these people.
That's what these magic shows are all about, is distraction, and he certainly practices a lot of it throughout. And there's a lot of audience participation. You could end up on stage very easily. And I came out of it thinking, there's nothing deep about this. There's nothing emotionally moving about it, but it is certainly entertaining. And I realize that I do like to be moved in the theater. Yes. And the times I walk out are the times when I'm not feeling moved. But this was well done enough that I could really appreciate it and stick with it because I was interested in what he was going to do next. I had FOMO. I felt if I walked out, I had fear of missing out.
Well, that's good.
Yeah, most things I walk out of, I don't care what's going to happen in the second act.
I don't know how they do some of these things on there.
You're not supposed to.
Well, I mean, we need the amazing Randy.
No, we don't.
Another gay man. Well, he was the one who exposed all these things. And
That's true.
All the psychics and the guy who bent the spoons and everything and all that kind of stuff.
But I would say it's certainly an entertaining evening in the theater. And how often do I say that?
Yeah.
Almost never.
I mean, we need that. we need relief. I mean, speaking of which, so we do have a few minutes here. I mean, we're burying the headline about impeachment and about what's going on. I mean,
I'm skeptical.
Oh wise Anne, who told us that.
Look, I think they've nailed this. There's no question that this guy was extorting the president of Ukraine.
Like a mafia boss, as Adam Schiff said.
Absolutely. But the question is, who cares? And the answer is not enough people.
Not enough people in the country?
Yeah.
That when they hear this and they focus on this thing, on this sellout of the country?
They don't care.
They don't care about
No.
selling out the country.
No, they don't.
Why?
And
Why don't they care?
because they think everybody sells out
What
the
if
country.
Obama did it?
Everybody is in it for themselves, so they're not surprised by this, and they don't like Biden anyway. And
What are you talking about? Every Democrat matched head-to-head against him wins. Although you heard Trump this week, he goes, yeah, I'm doing very well on Rasmussen, but I'm really 10 points higher because most of the people, when they call my supporters, they don't want to talk to the pollsters.
And that's true. The polls have always undercounted the right wing, and we are constantly, for decades, surprised by Republicans winning when we don't expect them to.
Don't forget, a lot of people came of age in the last 4 years, and they don't like this guy, and they will vote in higher numbers than they used to.
I'm not saying he's going to win. I'm just saying I don't think, and I think and hope the House may indeed impeach him. But I certainly don't think the Senate's going to turn around, and I think this is going to sink under the waves like everything else is. Remember Robert Mueller?
Well, he was not hard-hitting enough, was he?
But how long did we spend
I know.
Following every
I know. Well, actually,
tiny bit of that?
The Nation magazine wrote an article about how this is one thing, make it one thing. People can focus on one thing.
Well, sure, they can. And as I say, they nailed him. It's very clear. But I suspect that not enough people care about it. Even the people who hate him may hate him for doing this, but in the end, they don't care enough. It's not big enough.
I mean, what would be that's out there?
If a tidal wave hit America and wiped out millions of people in the middle of the country and he did nothing, they might care about that.
Well, I wouldn't blame that on him, although he did bring the.
If he did nothing.
He did bring that down on America by betraying it.
Well, we're still working on this at Reclaim Pride too, and we're starting to meet again to talk about next year and whether we're going to have another march, which I think most people want to do, and how that would be focused and themed, and how do we
during the election year.
Yes, and
I thought even this year it might have been a good idea to march on Trump Tower or something.
Well, the thing is, there's been a lot of marching on Trump Tower. Can we be more creative? Can we do something that has some real impact? Can we refine our mission and describe it in a way that does resonate with people? And that's what we're in the process of figuring out and having meetings. So our next meeting, I guess, our next general meeting is October 2nd. At the People's Forum. That would be next week.
What's the address of the People's
7
Forum?
o'clock. Oh, you
it's
have
on
to
West
ask me.
37th Street.
It is, between 8th and 9th.
Yes,
the
can't
people
miss it,
south
middle of
side
the block.
the street, middle of the block, 3-something.
337, I think.
No.
No?
No.
All right.
320 maybe, 370, 360.
The People's Forum. Google it.
Reclaim Pride. So
Yeah.
if you want to be in on the planning
All right,
for
October 2nd.
October 2nd, 7 p.m. at the People's
A
Forum.
Wednesday, right after the show.
Wednesday. It's always a Wednesday.
What time, 7?
7. And we're also talking about interim events, other actions, how broadly or narrowly we define our mission. So we would be very happy to have you join us.
By the way, there's something else happening on October 8th, and that's a memorial service for Andy Velez at the LGBT, not the second.
It's not the 8th.
Fifth. No.
The 5th.
5th, I'm
Yes,
sorry. Put your glasses on, Andy.
at the center.
Put your glasses
I'm speaking at that. That's how I know.
October the 5, 7 to 9, Andy Velez, the great AIDS activist, gay activist, who
At the
died at the age
center.
of 80, I guess it was.
Somewhere
Was
around
it?
that, yes.
Memorial
Long,
service. We
rich
will all
life.
be there
Yeah.
for Andy and for each other.
And next week we will be here for you. So please join us here at Gay USA. We will see you then.
Bye-bye.
Bye.